crazy. I always knew that I wanted to be in radio broadcasting. I mean from a very young man growing up. In fact, it was always the joke when we'd go outside to play road hockey that not only did I play road hockey, but I was also the announcer all the time. And even listening to radio broadcasts from the local radio stations where I grew up in Kitchener, I always thought it would be fascinating to be involved in radio, and that's what I wanted to do. I remember my dad coming home one time, and he had a gift for all of us, and it was this cassette recorder with a microphone. Well, that was probably about the best gift that I had ever seen, and I took it from there, learning to record myself, listen to myself, listening to the DJs on local radio do breaks, and then mocking them, even singing the songs. And I know my sister used to give me a hard time about singing the songs and introing the songs, but as I mentioned, it was just something that was in me and that I wanted to do all my life. In grade 6, I had a teacher named Blake Storms, and it was his first year, and I didn't know this at the time that it was his first year, but I looked up to this guy. He used to bring his guitar in and play for us, and he was just such a great guy. But he had an idea that he could make a radio program on a reel-to-reel tape and have the students do different jobs. So one could be the host DJ, another one could do the news, another one could do the weather, another could do the sports, etc. And we would switch around in the first couple of weeks, and I would do weather, and then I got the chance to be the DJ, and after I did it once, everybody wanted me to do it again and again, so I was the DJ for the rest. And we used to run that tape for the whole school, the public school, during our recess breaks, and we just had a whole lot of fun doing that. But yeah, that was so influential on me that I still carried that idea that I am going to be in the radio business. As I got into high school and in the later years in high school, of course, still having the desire to be a radio broadcaster, I can remember going down to a guidance counselor that I had made an appointment with. And, you know, he asked the usual questions. You know, what is it that you want to be? And I told him I wanted to be a radio broadcaster. He stopped me right there and he said, "No, you can't be. You don't have that low voice. Like, do you ever listen to the CBC and they all have that really low voice? Well, you don't have that, so I don't think that you can be a radio broadcaster, and you should try to think of something else." Well, I don't know who this guy was, but at that point, I was to the point where I was like, no, I'm going to be a radio broadcaster. I just know I am, and I still carried that dream. I worked a number of years at a bowling center in Waterloo just to kind of get some money to go to college. And of course I wanted to take radio broadcasting. I was going to take it in my hometown as well, over at Conestoga College. I did apply 1 year, but so did approximately 200 other students. So it was tough to get in. I didn't get accepted that first year, but they did call me back and said that they had room in their journalism course if I wanted to get some experience and backing and maybe roll it into radio broadcasting later on. So I did. I took the journalism course at that point. I wasn't a great writer, but it did get me to meet a lot of key players in journalism and the media departments. In the basement of our house, it was pretty much a wide open rec room, a finished rec room, but I had my stereo down there, and I also had about 2 or 3 cassette players, and my mom had a little keyboard, and it was kind of funny because I would take the keyboard and set up a beat and a bass on it, and then I would play my guitar and I would record that together. and then I would transfer that onto another tape, play it back, and then go over top of it by playing my banjo. And then doing the vocal part. And I was doing it on 3 different cassette players, but mixing it all together, and got it all on one tape. And little did I know that I would be involved in production in my future years in radio, but now it's much easier when I use Adobe Audition and mix things together. I'm not using 3 different tape players anymore, but simply putting voice and music all mixed together on Adobe Audition on the computer. So it makes it so much easier. But back then, I just had a lot of fun mixing some music together and having a little fun with that. In the meantime, I volunteered at a radio station in Waterloo, which was a community radio station, CKWR. And they were looking for people to join them and looking for different programming ideas. Well, a lot of students and a lot of community people all wanted to do rock programs. I come in with an idea because I liked bluegrass music and started a little bit of a collection of bluegrass music, that I would do a bluegrass radio show. And little did I know I'd still be doing it 25 years later. But I did. They didn't know what bluegrass was. I made a tape for them, a cassette tape of what bluegrass was and me, how I sounded on the air, and they actually really liked it and brought me in. And this was a fantastic thing for me, because there I was actually going out over the air now, broadcasting a bluegrass. Through the volunteer station at CKWR, I got to meet a lot of great people, and a lot of them were professional broadcasters that still loved radio so much they would volunteer time over at CKWR. So I got to meet a lot of these guys, and I learned a lot from them. And they also suggested that if I wanted to further my career, that I apply over at CIAM in Cambridge, AM 96. A gentleman named Ron Fitzpatrick was the program director down there. I learned so much from Ron. Ron was just one of these guys that took young people that were interested in broadcasting and raised their level. So I really appreciate everything that he did. But I would do the midnight till 6 shift on weekends. So it was a rather interesting time to be on the air, but it was a really good chance to break myself into the radio business. But we would spin continuous music. There was no commercials involved in the midnight till 6. So we would talk over the intros of songs. So sometimes we had 5 seconds to tell what the weather was, which was absolutely fascinating. But it really gave you a sense of timing, and as I mentioned, it really raised the level of broadcasting. A lot of great people in my past have taught me a lot of great things. When I was in journalism, a guy named Bob Trotter, I could still remember words of advice from him saying, take a different way home every night because you never know what you'll see. I always thought that was fascinating. Ron Fitzpatrick at CIM Radio, he always said, always be at your best because you never know who's listening. Well, that really came true. And one afternoon I was at CKWR doing my bluegrass radio program in the afternoon, filling some time, and I got a phone call. The gentleman that took the call had said, "You're really going to want to take this, Dan." I thought it was a joke for a long time. I wasn't sure what was going on, but the gentleman on the phone had said that he was Johnny Cash's manager. And Johnny and June Carter and the Carter family were coming down to play the Center in the Square that evening. And they were on the bus and looking for a radio station to listen to. And Johnny and June tuned in to my radio station. And they listened to my radio show. So I was just, I went, what, really? You know, and it was, yes, it was absolutely true. So he said, we'd like to invite you to the show tonight. There's no seats, so you'll have to come backstage, but you get a chance to meet Johnny and June and the Carter family. Well, I still wasn't sure whether it was real or not, but I remember calling my sister up saying, Gwen, this is what happened, told her the story, and she says, you know what, if it's a joke, we just walk away from it, but if it's real, you know, you're not going to want to miss this. We went to backstage door to the center of the square, and they knew we were coming, invited us in. I got right away sat right between June Carter and Anita Carter, and sat and chatted with them and had a great time. And then, let alone, the manager comes up and says, "Dan, I want you to meet Johnny Cash." And there was Johnny, and he was tuning his guitar at the time, and the manager went up and said, "Johnny, this is the young man that we were listening to on the radio on the way in to the bluegrass music." Johnny just kind of was tuning at the time, turned his head backwards, kind of looked at me and said, "Son, just keep doing what you're doing." I was in awe, and that was my meeting with the man in black, Johnny Cash, and it's something I'll never forget. And guess what? I took Johnny's advice too, because I'm still doing what I'm doing. Later on, many concerts that we would take bus trips down to. The country music industry is just fantastic. The people are great. Got to meet Clint Black. Got to meet Aaron Tippin, among many others. Marty Stewart. The list kind of went on, but so many stories that I could tell there. Also got to do many concerts, and got to go to the United States a couple times as well, and had a very neat meeting with a very important person in my life, and that would be my wife, Angie. I had been offered from CKGL to do a trip to Jamboree in the Hills, which is held in Ohio, and I went down. She wasn't on the bus, but through friends of a friend, we met amongst those hundreds of thousands of people, and that was the start of our relationship. And of course, we're still married today, and I have two wonderful children from Angie as well. So, and I love her very much. But that was a fantastic trip, and a great opportunity that I got to go to that. And later on, took Angie to Branson, Missouri on a bus trip that was also organized through the CKGL. When I made the move to Harriston after I got married, and there's a station up in Midwestern Ontario that has been here as a legendary station forever, and that I always wanted to work for, was CKNX Radio. And they had an FM station and an AM station at the time. It was FM 102 and CKNX AM 920. And I was thinking I should apply there, and even my wife said, "Why don't you apply at CKNX?" So I did. I took the initiative and came and applied, and took on the oldie show on a Saturday morning, just to do some part-time work. Well, it was a fantastic move, because eventually the station was growing. They were going to add another station, 94.5 The Bull. They needed some extra help. They needed some help in the production department, mixing commercials. And I decided that's what I would like to do as well, is mix commercials in the production department. So I did. I took on that job, and it was full-time for me, and I've been doing that for quite a few years now. But also continuing on, I brought my bluegrass show here, which has been on the air now for 25 years. Also I have been awarded with 2 awards from the Central Canadian Bluegrass Association for DJ of the Year back in 2010 and 2011. Have been nominated a number of years for that award as well. The Rock and Retro Sunday morning show, although it started as an oldie show on Saturday, it has continued on and now is on Sunday mornings from 6 a.m. till 10 a.m. You can catch the Bluegrass Show from 5 p.m. on CKNX AM 920. It's also broadcast on our cousin station in Chatham on Country 92.9 at 2 o'clock. The radio industry also, as I became full-time here doing radio production, it allowed my evenings to open up. Of course, I had some wacko hours through the years, but it allowed my evenings to open up. And I had a strong interest in getting involved in theater work, and joined the Grey Wellington Theater Guild. It was actually my daughter who had went for a spot in the play Annie that the Great Wellington Theatre Guild was put on. They needed some older gentlemen to be in the play, and I went for it, and I really enjoyed being in the theater. I was Drake the butler in the play Annie. That was my first play. And most recently was in the play with my children, both Jacob and Sadie Lynn, in a play called Ebenezer, which was from the Christmas Carol from Charles Dickens. But it was all brand new music that was put together by Lindsay Thomas Morgan, who's also from Midwestern Ontario. It was just a great pleasure to be in this play with my kids and the great talented people that come out, again, all volunteer-wise. There's some great talent across Midwestern Ontario. I really find it strange that I knew what I really wanted to do from a young guy up and followed that dream, but it just seemed that the doors always opened for me into the radio industry, and even when I got away from it a little bit, it seemed to pull me back in. Any advice that I could give you out there is to follow your dreams, everybody. I'm not by no means a rich man, but I feel very rich inside. I've got a beautiful family, I've got a beautiful home, and I've got a job that I really love coming to every day. And to me, that's the richest you can be.